welcome to another watercolor segment with Laurel Hart. Today I want to talk about one of my least favorite pigments to work with, and that is greens. Greens are just always a little bit tricky for me, and I know that they may be also for other artists. So today I wanted to do a little presentation about greens. Jane Schaefer posted this question: I wonder if you have any pre-mixed green on your palette, or do you always make your own? And actually I do both. I have two greens that I use. One is a nice high-key green that I've come to rely on the most. It's called Sap Green. It's a nice transparent green. And then I have another lower key green that is called Olive Green. And I like that one because it's a little more muted in color. So I'd like to show you how I do mix some of my greens. What I do with mixing my greens is what I would call bending color. That is, I'll take the tube green and then I'll add another color or another pigment to it to make it either lean to warm or cool or brighter or more subdued. And so here are a few examples of what I mean and some of the good mixtures that I like to use for my greens. Starting with the Sap Green, which is what I use the most. I like Sap Green mixed with Indanthrene Blue, which is a very nice transparent blue. So you can get a pretty rich, almost a pine tree green with that mixture. It's got a little bit of a blue cast, but it's really a nice green. And then I can bend it by adding in some high-key yellow. That was cadmium yellow. I can bend it to make it more of a spring green. And then I can tone it way down if I add in some transparent oxide red, which will make it much more of an olive green color. So I can pretty much get most of the different greens that I need to use in a painting requiring foliage by just using my Sap Green and adding these other colors to it. Showing you just an example with my olive green. This would be maybe looking at a really subdued green. I would take that with some burnt umber even, which is a really dark brown. So I can get a very, very deep olive green using that combination. And then if I add a blue to it, I can go even deeper, really, really deep foresty green. And then another step is to add some permanent alizarin crimson to it. And then you can get a really almost black green. So those are some good color mixes that I have found are really useful in painting foliage. One thing that I have discovered, I used to mix my green with ultramarine blue by adding a cool yellow to that. But I finally realized, and let me demonstrate what happens here. This is my ultramarine blue. And then if I add a warm yellow to it, like cadmium yellow, this is what I get. It's a really, really dead looking green. And I've figured out the reason for that. What I was doing was mixing a warm blue because ultramarine blue has red in it, and then I was mixing it with a yellow. So that means I had a whole primary triad, which when mixed on the palette has red, yellow, and blue in it and comes up with a very gray and lifeless green. So I've stopped mixing my greens with with ultramarine blue, and I've been a lot happier. So by using a cooler blue and a pure yellow, then I can get a really nice, rich colored green. So I'd like to turn now to working on a painting that uses a lot of green in it. I received a demo or a photograph from Artie, and he asked if I would demo this. And I decided that it was a good example of painting foliage, and so I decided that I would use this, but I won't do this again, so don't send me photos to paint from. Mostly because if I don't have a personal connection to the photo, it's hard to be passionate about something that you don't have ownership of. So I'm going to get started, and this is going to encompass a very lot of green, and so I hope I can make this work. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about my drawing and the fact that I'm actually using masking fluid in this painting, which I very rarely do. And I think probably most of you have had experience with using this. It's a colorless art masking fluid, and it dries white, but what it does is it masks the paper so that you can actually paint over it, and then at the end you can peel it back off the paper and you can preserve the whites that way. The reason that I don't use it very often is that it seems to end up in the wrong place when I get finished, or else the shapes are just really kind of clunky. So I don't use it much, but in this particular painting I'm going to, so that I can paint directly over the whites of the waterfall here. The other thing that I have done that you can probably tell here is I've almost done a value sketch in my drawing this time. I have indicated where my darkest darks will be, and left the areas where my lighter values will be, and then masked out the plain white for the water in the waterfall. I think there's something to be said about using three in your painting, either a dark, a light, and a mid-value, and also a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, particularly when you're doing a landscape. So I'm going to try to section my painting off, per se, into three sections. I'm going to do my very lightest white, which I've already got down, and then my my mid values, and finally coming in with the darkest darks here. And I'm not worried that I've filled this in pretty heavily with pencil, because I'm going to be coming over that area with very dark paint. And in the end, it won't matter that it's got that pencil there. So I'm going to get started now. I'll take just a brief minute to clear my palette off, and then we'll get underway and hope that I can make some sense of this little painting here. Okay, to start off, I'm going to use my Winsor Newton squirrel mop, and this is a size 1. And I'm going to lay in the sky first. And this is really the only place where I'm going to have any straight blue here. But I am going to get this in here. There's just going to be those few little indications of sky. I'll soften kind of the edges on this side for what looks like where the cloud is. And then I'm going to begin, like I was mentioning, with what would be my first layer in the atmosphere of this landscape, which would be the closest things to me that are those, that would be the foliage in the sunlight. And so I'm going to put those in with a very, very bright yellow. maybe tone it down just a tad with yellow ochre. But I'm pretty much going to go over most of this whole place, most of this whole painting with this yellow. And you can see where the resist is not letting me put down any color there. It's not letting it absorb into the paper. But I'm going to get this all over to start with here. And then what it's going to do is indicate, like I said, what foliage is in sunlight here. And right now this looks really pretty garish, but it won't after I get the other layers on top of it. Kind of skipping over those rocks anyway because that's mostly purple in there. And those little rocks here in the foreground are going to be a great little lead-in up to the waterfall for the eye to follow in. It's been pretty well established that the eye comes up from the bottom of the paper. So so if your eye enters here, that leads you right up into the waterfall, which is the main event of the painting here. And I recognize that I haven't really got that in one of the sweet spots of the design area, but in this case I've made a conscious decision of leaving that waterfall kind of right in the center. I just kind of like it how it is, so I've left it that way. So let's let this dry for just a minute, and then we will come back in with the next layer. So this layer is going to be still in the mid-value range. Remember, I've talked about how color is more vivid in the mid-value range. So this would be more of the middle ground foliage that our eye would see. And for this, I'm gonna use my Sap Green and also some still add a little bit of yellow to it because I still want to keep it pretty green. And so now I'm coming in on a lot of this foliage here that I can kind of see highlighted. And just kind of following my mid-value pattern here and abstractly putting in these leaf shapes. But staying still in a light, well, mid-value range here. And I don't need to be too careful about what this looks like as foliage at this point, because it's the painting behind it when I come back in with the darks that is going to shape it to the color that I want. I'm sorry if my head is getting in the picture. My palette is just so far away that I have to lean pretty far over there. Now this part here that is in direct sunlight there, I'm going to leave as this yellow color. So I'm going to kind of give myself a bit of an outline on what the shape of that tree is at the edges. Still using that same color combination. And trying to soften some of these edges here so I don't end up with too many hard edges at the end there. But you can see I'm pretty much going with my mid-value over the areas where my darkest darks are, because I'm going to come back in on those. When I come in with my very darks. And you can start to kind of see the abstract pattern that I'm trying to create here. That will be very dark over in that corner. And this here too, I can go ahead and cover with the mid-value, leaving just a few little highlights in there. And then I've noticed that there's some kind of some red dirt down in here. I'm letting that mingle a little bit on the paper. Okay, so that is my mid value, and I think I will get that dry as well, so that I can come back in with my next layer, which would be the things that are most in the distant, the darkest darks. So at this point, I've got 2 dimensions on there. I've got what's really up close and then what's back in probably what you'd call the middle ground. And now I'm going to start working on areas of the background and those things that are going to push forward the leaves that are highlighted in sunlight, the rocks, and the things that I want to have come into the foreground. And now you will begin to see the dimensions start to take place in the painting. So I'm going to start here with a green I already kind of demonstrated here. I've got indanthrene blue, sap green, and some transparent oxide red, I believe. So I'm gonna, and a lot of this I am mixing more on the palette than I normally do, but I still will let some of this color mix and mingle as pure pigments on the paper. And I just want to keep these pigments really clean. I can see that there's kind of some purples back in there, so and now this is what I was talking about, how I want to highlight now some of these leaves that are in the sunlight here. Okay. And I don't want to leave a really hard edge on that side of the waterfall because that's going to eventually be uncovered and painted in this kind of darker blue here. And now I'm painting positive shapes here with these leaves that are up here in the top. So that you do get the indication of some stuff that's coming out in the over those other layers of foliage. And I'm just going to keep adding these dark values to push forward the other layers of foliage that I want to come to the foreground here. And I really like adding permanent alizarin crimson into greens sometimes. It just gives a little nicer variety. And then all this little lovely light foliage here, I'm going to try to preserve all of that. And right through there, I've got a really nice edge that I want to leave a crisp area, because that is right in the sun. So the trick is to kind of get a good balance of busy areas against more what would be the word? Quiet areas. And sometimes I like to just put in a little shot of the pure yellow and let that just bleed in. So then I've got another dark area over here. That I want to be a little more quiet. So I'm just playing back and forth with what is receding and what is advancing to the eye. Trying to have some diffused areas and some areas that are more sharp, like some of the leaves up in here. Now down in here is another really dark area up against these rocks. And again, I can see there's some really beautiful red kind of right down there up against the rocks. this, I think, is going to quiet down a little bit here. And I think some of the very darkest dark is over in here, so I do want to keep that in. And just varying the triad as I go here. Very, very abstract patterns of light and shade. That's all that is. And now I want to do this stuff over here. I want to do as positive painting. So that sets that into the foreground. And now I'm coming against this this outer edge of this tree here that is highlighted in the sunlight. And this again is going to be some of the darkest darks over in here. And more of the smallest shapes there to really set that tree off. And if I end up feeling like I have too many hard edges, I can sometimes just come back with a wash of manganese blue to kind of set it off into the background. Okay. But you start to see how the waterfall is getting set off. And then up in here. And over in here, I'm trying to get a little more diffused color in here, so I'm not seeing so much hard edge. But so I'm pretty close to getting all my shadow edges or shadow areas in here. Getting some burnt umber in here to kind of make that really dark shadow shape back in here. And then down here, some more positive shape leaves. This is what I'm kind of doing right in here now. Trying to kind of leave this band of lightness in through there. Coming over into there. Okay. Okay, that's pretty much the map of the pattern of light and shade there. So now what I want to do is start working on some of these darks in here on the rocks. And I want them to be colorful in here, but at the same time really dark. Okay. All right, so I've kind of established my pattern of darks and lights here now. Just continue on the rocks down in here. Okay, I think I'm ready to peel off the masking fluid here and start kind of getting some of the shadows in the water. There's probably a better way to do this, but oh dear. That's what I get. got some stuff on my finger there. I don't know if I can lift that. Well, I'm not really thrilled about that big. Oh, for crying out loud. What is going on here? That is right in the really, really white area I'm supposed to be saving. Oh boy. I'm being quite careless. Anyway, I'm just making it worse, so better leave it alone. All right, so I'm going to start working in some blues up here in the waterfall. Also letting that go over the line and back into the foliage there. And as the waterfall comes more to the bottom, it seems like it is getting a little pinker down there. And I'm just trying to follow the abstract patterns of light and shade in the water area. And I'm trying to connect the waterfall to the background. So that it looks like it belongs to it. Got some really dark, rocky stuff in here. Okay, then working down in this area. Oh, I'm gonna ruin this thing yet. One at the bottom where we're trying to get this spray. I want to leave that really, really white. And these are my very darkest darks going up the edge of the waterfall there. And down in here. Okay, so these are coming in here to finish off the rocks. Okay, so I am getting pretty close to being done here. Still pulling off some of the masking fluid at the bottom where these rocks are. And I really do need to kind of indicate here where the water is spraying back up here. And the waterfall. And then my rock needs a surface here of some sort. Needs to be a little purple. Just getting a little bit of a wash on these rocks so they're not too white. I'm kind of just blending some of this back. And over here, I'm wetting this a little bit to get this give this a really dark, deep, dark green back in there too. Then in here, I think I need to have a little more of a mid-value green. Okay, still trying to get my very deepest darks in here. Finishing up shadows on these rocks. This is my need to describe what these are doing a little better. Okay. I need to kind of make some variations in the water over here so you can kind of tell that's a little side waterfall thing. Okay, now I'm pretty much done, but I'm still feeling like there is a lot of hard edges in here that I don't want completely all over the place. Okay, and then up into this over up in here is where I'm thinking needs a little more. A little more definition. And down in here, feeling like that needs to be a little bit darker. Cut a little bit of that out there. And we have just a little bit of stuff to kind of show that that foliage is in the background there. I don't want that too prominent there, but I need to set that off a little bit. Okay. Now I'm gonna, to soften back some of this hard edge stuff, I'm gonna take just a brush with wet water, and I'm gonna have to resolve this later, clean that up a little bit there. So I'm just gonna take a wet brush and soften up some of this stuff, because those things are kind of bugging me. A few of them I'd like to leave. Oh, I think that already helps so much. Just had so much stuff that was kind of glaring. And that helps a great deal. Yeah, just kind of puts some of that more into the background and lets the waterfall sing a little better. I may may do that just right over some of this as well. Let a little bit of that stay. But I just did have too many edges that were a little too hard. And I think that has just kind of quieted it back a little bit. So that's a trick you can kind of use if you feel like things are a little too hard-edged. I'll do that sometimes. Maybe restore a little bit of the brightness of the green, even though it will be softer. Yeah, I can live with that a lot better. So I think that is where I will stop for now. I think it's really looking pretty good. I hope that was a good demonstration for you on the use of using greens and how to mix them. I think it was a good thing to discover for me that the ultramarine blue is not really a good blue to mix for greens for me. And I think in this painting I was able to avoid getting into mud. I think I'll do a little bit more to finish it up, but I think that is all for now, and thank you for joining me again. I'll see you next time. Thank you.